Hey y'all, I wanted to go ahead and just create a quick screencast just illustrating what we did on Monday with loops and how to use a loop to tile images across the screen. I think it probably makes sense for me to just create this video so that you can play along, you can pause it, you can look at the code and just analyze it a bit without, the speed of the classroom. So what I want to do here is I just took out everything we did on Monday in this program. What I'm in the Mario.js program. This is the program that we rendered clouds in. So if we look at what's going on here, we have our clouds rendering. I have my clouds really light. I'm actually gonna go ahead and change that. Let's go down to our cloud function, and I'm gonna make these a little bit darker. Give it a little bit more. There we go. So we can see them a little bit. So we have our clouds in the sky. And what we want to do is we want to create the ground here like it is in Mario 1. So the Mario 1 ground, right? If we look at the Mario 1, this image right here, right? This bad boy right here. If we look at this image, we're trying to make the ground look like this. So we have this image, and notice how this is basically just a tiled image, right? It's one image just strewn across the entire screen. And we see a lot of that within graphics, right? We have one image and we just tile it across. To do this, we're going to use the idea of a for loop. So what I did was in our environments, we did bring in the image that's required to do this. So in our images directory, we have this Mario floor. Now this is posted in Canvas, and you can download it right from there. I did crop it a bit so that it's just the image, and all you have to do is just drag and drop it right into this environment, and you have it there. But now there's a couple of things that we need to do before we even think about loops, right? We need to be able to bring this image into our script. So the first thing we need to do is we need to have a variable that we can store the image data in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and say var img ground equals, and we're just going to make it blank for now. We're going to initialize it to nothing. Now I called it img ground. Just prefixed it with img to say that, hey, this is an image, and then we're calling it ground. I made that up. That's just the label that we're putting onto the image. Now, the next thing we're going to want to do is we want to preload this image. We need to use that preload function in order for us to load the image up so that we have our image data when the program actually runs. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and define a new function, and we're going to say preload, and we'll open and close the curlies. A lot of what I'm seeing in class is the management of curly brackets, right? We want to make sure that all of our code is inside of these curly brackets with the exception of our variables. The variables are declared globally so that we can access them throughout the entire program. The preload function is going to contain now our loading of the images. So we're going to store in this image ground variable the actual image data by calling load image. Now, another thing I'm seeing a lot is make sure that I is capitalized here and the L is lowercase. And then within the first parameter here, we're going to go into images / the name of the image we're looking to load. So floor.png. Okay, so now at this point, our program should look exactly the same. Nothing has changed yet, with the exception of we now have the image data for the ground inside of this image ground variable. Awesome. So now that we have it loaded, we can now do something with it, right? So we have to load it, and now we can do something with it. Now to do anything with it, we need to figure out first, where do we put the code to draw the image, right? Because we need to use an image function for this. So this program has a couple of different functions that we've defined. We have the cloud function, which is enabling us to draw clouds. And then we have the ground function, which is enabling us to draw the ground. So if we're looking to improve the ground, what function do you think we need to work in now? The ground function, right? So we're going to go to the ground function here. Now make sure that you're inside of these curly brackets. Now instead of drawing a rectangle, I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. And now the program should have no ground. We just took the ground away. And now what we're going to do is we're going to draw the actual Mario floor. So I'm going to use the image function here. And now watch the case here. Notice how the editor tries to capitalize this. You want to make sure that that is a lowercase I. And now the image function takes in a couple of parameters. The first is going to be the actual image data, which we're storing in the image ground variable, and then the position. So we could say 0, 0 if we wanted to put this in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. So now if we go here, we should see, boom, we have now the ground, but the ground's in the sky. So it's not doing us too good up there. What we're going to do is now we'll move the Y position down to the window height. But now when we do this, the ground goes away again. This is because the ground is actually rendered below the screen now. We need to offset this to the size of the image, which I think is it 100 or 200? It's 200. So notice how I just subtracted 100. Now we see it. And now if we go 200, boom. Now that one brick is sitting right at the bottom. So now we can start to think about loops and how we can tile this. Now, the easy way to do this, or the kind of, the simple way without loops would be to just duplicate this, right? So we could say, hey, I'm going to draw another image right here, and it's going to draw right on top of itself. So we're going to draw two of them, but we're only going to see one. But if we now increase the X position by the size of the image, now we'll see two. Now we can go ahead and do that again to say, what would this be now? 400, right? And now we see three. Now, this type of process that we're going through right now, we see a clear pattern starting to arise, right? Now we're going to go ahead and add 200 to that again, 600, right? So we're doing the same thing over and over again. And by doing that, we're adding new bricks to the floor. And you can see we're starting to build out our floor. Now, whenever you see this within software development, this is a huge red flag for saying, hey, this is not an efficient way to do this. I can do this a better way using loops. So how do we do this with a loop? So I'm going to go ahead and remove this all. And we're going to write our loop. So we're going to use a for loop for this. So to write a for loop, we just type for, open parentheses. Now the for loop is going to take three components here. First is the initial variable. So we're going to call it I, and we're going to declare it's equal to 0. And now here's our termination point. How long do we want this loop to go for? So I'm going to say loop as long as it's less than or equal to 10. And then we have our iterator, which is how are we going to iterate the looping variable? So we're going to go up by 1 in each loop. So we're going to start at 0 and go all the way up to 10. Awesome. So now this will loop 11 times, right? From 0 to 10. If we wanted to make it loop 10 times, we could just take this equal out, and now it'll loop 10 times, right? It'll go from 0 to 9. Okay, so let's keep it like that. And now let's go ahead and draw our image. So now we can use that image function inside of the loop. Notice how we have curly brackets now. So we have curly brackets inside of curly brackets. We got to pay attention to where those curly brackets are, because if we put this like here, that means it's not going to be inside the loop. Or if we put this here, now it's just floating in the middle of nowhere and it will never be executed. So we want to make sure that our code is inside the for loop, inside these curly brackets. So now we're going to want to do the same thing. We're going to say image ground, comma. Now here's the kicker, and here's the challenging piece of this, is what do we put here? So if we put 0 here, it's going to go at 0, and we know we need to do the window height minus the 200, which is fine. Now if we look at what this renders, we're only going to see one block here. But it did render 10 times. It's because it's on top of each other. We're only seeing one. So how do we change this? Now here's a quick little math trick here. We can use this looping variable inside the loop. So we could say I here, And now X will technically be incrementing, but only by 1 pixel at a time. So you don't visually see it. So what we can do is we can use multiplication to scale this up by the size of the image. So if we say I times 200, that means on the first loop, it's going to be 0 times 200, right? The second loop is going to be 1 times 200, which is 200. Then the third is going to be 2 times 200, which is 400. And then 600. And then 800, right? And we keep going. By abstracting this to just using the I variable here, we can go ahead and just have one image call inside this loop, and it'll execute as many times as the loop executes and increment the position by 200 each time. So let's see what that looks like. Boom, we have our ground. So it's nicely tiled across the screen. Awesome. So that's pretty much it. That's what we did on Monday. And I'm going to leave this here. You can go ahead and look at this code. There's a couple of just key takeaways here. Number one is loading the image using the preload function and storing that image data in a variable, a global variable that we define. Step two is now to use that image inside of the ground function so that we can render it. And then the third step, the final step, is to use a for loop to not conditionally, to put it onto the screen using the iterator variable I in order for us to dynamically place it based on the value of I and the size of the image. Awesome. So on Wednesday, we're going to explore a little bit of nested loops. We're going to go inside loops of loops, which is it's going to be like the movie Inception, if you ever saw that. So we're going to explore a little bit of how this can create a grid design on the screen. But any questions, let me know. Thanks.